On a calm Monday morning, the United States wakes up to something that doesn't look like an attack. No missiles, no explosions, no breaking news of troops landing anywhere. The stock market opens as usual. People get in their cars, drop their kids off at school, and head to work. But thousands of miles away, in Beijing, a single coordinated decision has just been signed that will quietly bring the United States to its knees without a single shot being fired. In a televised announcement, Chinese officials declare a temporary suspension of exports of strategic goods to the United States, citing unacceptable interference in internal affairs and threats to regional stability. Those strategic goods include three categories that most Americans have never thought about for even a second: active pharmaceutical ingredients, rare earth elements, and key components for power, telecom, and high-tech manufacturing. At first, it sounds abstract, another round of economic saber-rattling. But within hours, American companies start getting hard emails from their suppliers. Orders canceled. Shipments indefinitely delayed. Contracts suspended due to force majeure. Warehouses that were expecting containers full of critical parts are suddenly told nothing is coming. In New Jersey and North Carolina, managers at major pharmaceutical plants stare at their inventory dashboards with a knot in their stomach. For years, the United States quietly outsourced the production of the basic building blocks of modern medicine. Not the finished pills you see in a bottle, but the chemical ingredients that make those pills work. Antibiotics, blood pressure meds, diabetes drugs, common anesthetics, painkillers. A huge share of those active ingredients came from one place: China, and to a lesser extent India, using Chinese raw materials. Most hospitals and pharmacies only keep a few weeks to a couple months of inventory on hand. It's cheaper that way. Just in time, supply chains keep costs low and profits high. But that system only works if the tap never turns off. Now, in a single day, the tap is closed. Inside a large urban hospital, the head pharmacist prints out a list of every drug where the supply chain runs through Chinese factories. It's not a few exotic cancer meds, it's hundreds of items. They start triaging in silence. Which patients can have their dosage stretched? Which non-emergency procedures need to be postponed? What happens when the last shipment of basic, broad-spectrum antibiotics is used up? Within a week, physicians across the country start getting emails from their hospital systems. Conserve these medications. Prepare alternatives where possible. If you've ever had surgery, an infection, or a chronic illness, your life has quietly depended on a global web of factories and freighters. That web is now a weapon pointed at the United States. At the same time, a much less visible crisis is unfolding in America's industrial heart. In a factory in Ohio that builds high-voltage transformers for the power grid, engineers are forced into an emergency meeting. Production has been running at full tilt for years because the U.S. grid is old and overloaded. Some of those transformers take a year or more to build, and they're packed with specialized steel, insulation, sensors, and control systems. A significant portion of those components, and the rare earth metals inside them, come from processing plants in China. Without those parts, you can't finish the transformers. Without transformers, you can't replace aging or damaged units in the grid. One major storm, one cyber attack, one equipment failure, and sections of the grid that go down might stay down, not for hours, but for weeks or months. Suddenly, the silent question hanging over every utility control room is, how many spare parts do we really have? And how long until we can't fix what breaks? In Texas and California, companies working on electric vehicles, solar panels, and wind turbines feel the choke almost instantly. The green transition that politicians love to promise is built on a foundation of rare earth elements, specialized magnets, lithium batteries, and precision electronics. China doesn't just mine a lot of those elements, it dominates the processing of them. The raw ore may come from all over the world, but it's refined, purified, and turned into something usable largely in Chinese facilities. The U.S. has the technical knowledge to do some of this at home, but not the scale and not the infrastructure, at least not yet. Permits for new mines and processing plants take years. Refineries are expensive, dirty, and politically unpopular. So, for decades, America chose the easy route. Let someone else do the messy part. That someone else now holds the power to decide whether your car gets built, whether your smartphone upgrade ships, whether your fighter jets receive the advanced electronics they need to fly. As days turn into a couple of weeks, the pain finally hits the average person's daily life. Pharmacies start quietly telling patients that certain generics are currently on back order. Alternatives, if they exist, may be more expensive or have harsher side effects. People who rely on specific medications for blood pressure, heart conditions, or mental health are told to check back later. Doctors go back to older, less optimal treatment regimens because the modern gold standard drugs simply aren't on the shelf. Manufacturers, from car companies in Michigan to electronics plants in Arizona, announce temporary slowdowns due to parts shortages. Overtime is cut. Shifts are consolidated. For the first time, workers hear the phrase supply chain blockade on the nightly news. The stock market, which shrugged at the first headlines, begins to panic. Tech companies warn that their next generation of chips, servers, and devices will be delayed indefinitely. Defense contractors behind closed doors brief the Pentagon. Maintenance of certain high-end weapons systems will be compromised if key components from abroad don't arrive. Warplanes, ships, and advanced radar systems aren't magic. They're metal, silicon, and optics, much of it built on global supply chains that were never designed with a hostile cutoff in mind. Meanwhile, in Beijing, nothing explodes, nothing burns. Cargo ships that used to sail packed with goods toward Los Angeles and Long Beach simply sit at anchor or are quietly redirected to ports in Europe, Africa, and South America. China publicly claims it's simply reallocating capacity to more reliable partners. State media air segments about American bullying and how China will no longer be held hostage by a single export market. What makes this blockade so devastating is how precisely it is targeted. China doesn't stop exporting everything to the entire world. It specifically chokes off the things the United States cannot easily replace quickly: drug ingredients, specific electronic components, rare earths, advanced batteries, specialty machine tools. Food still flows. Consumer junk still appears on shelves from other countries. So some Americans wonder if the crisis is overblown, until they or someone they love needs a medication that just isn't there. The U.S. government scrambles to respond. Emergency orders are signed to fast-track domestic production of critical drugs and components. Old factories are inspected and asked if they can be retooled. Chemical plants that shut down years ago are offered subsidies to restart. But these are not things you spin up in days. Building a new pharmaceutical ingredient facility, getting it inspected, certified, and running at full capacity can take years. Turning on a rare earth refinery in the United States means fighting environmental lawsuits, local opposition, and regulatory hurdles that were never designed with survival in mind. All the while, foreign adversaries watch closely. They see an America that has spent decades focusing on abstract fights overseas, while quietly handing its industrial and pharmaceutical lifeline to a rival. If the U.S. responds with military escalation in the Pacific, it risks turning an economic chokehold into a shooting war it may not be ready for. If it backs down politically, it signals to the world that it can be coerced without a single bullet fired. At the human level, ordinary people feel something they haven't felt in generations: vulnerability. The idea that you could go to a pharmacy with a valid prescription and be told, "We don't have that anymore," shatters the illusion of endless abundance. The realization that blackouts could last longer because key parts for the grid aren't available changes how people look at their homes, their pantries, their backup generators. Quietly, some families start stocking up, not just on food, but on basic medical supplies, first aid kits, and any over-the-counter meds still available. Doctors hold frank conversations with their most fragile patients about what to do if their regular medication is simply not obtainable for a while. Hospitals dust off old paper protocols in case digital systems tied to delayed hardware start failing. This is what a 21st century siege looks like. No tanks at the gates, no enemy bombers overhead, just a deliberate twisting of economic and technological dependencies into a weapon.
We took this for granted.
A realization, too late, that the most powerful nation on Earth outsourced too many of the things that keep its people alive, warm, connected, and functioning. One day, the blockade will end. Politics will shift, deals will be struck, alternative suppliers will eventually come online, but the scar tissue will remain. Every American who lived through that slow, suffocating squeeze will understand something their parents and grandparents took for granted. You don't truly know how strong your country is until someone else decides to stop sending you the things you thought would always arrive. And the real question that lingers after the first blockade is lifted is not just how America responds today, but whether it chooses to rebuild the capacity to stand on its own tomorrow, or continues to walk the world with a quiet hand at its throat, pretending not to notice until the grip tightens again.